Genesis chapter 6 is one of the most unsettling passages in the entire Bible. Not because it is unclear, but because it forces the reader to slow down. Most people encounter Genesis 6 as a brief and confusing moment. A few verses about the sons of God, a passing reference to the Nephilim, then suddenly the flood. It feels abrupt, almost disconnected. But for the ancient reader, Genesis 6 was not confusing at all. It was explanatory. To understand why, we must stop reading this passage in isolation. Genesis begins with order. In Genesis chapter 1, God creates the heavens and the earth. Light is separated from darkness. The waters are divided. Boundaries are established. Again and again, the text tells us that what God creates is good. Humanity is then created with purpose, to bear God's image, to steward creation, to extend order into the world. This idea of order is central to the biblical worldview. Creation is not chaotic, it is structured, it is sustained by boundaries, but almost immediately those boundaries begin to fracture. In Genesis 4, Cain murders Abel. Violence enters human history for the first time. By Genesis 5, death is repeated like a drum beat through the genealogy. Then we reach Genesis 6. Scripture says this, and listen carefully. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. That sentence is doing more than describing behavior. It is describing saturation. Evil is no longer occasional, it is continual. The text continues, "Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence." Before we move on, we need to pause here. Modern readers often assume the Bible tells its stories quickly, but ancient texts were meant to be heard slowly. When Genesis says that the earth was filled with violence, it is not offering a passing comment. It is making a legal. That phrase matters. The earth was filled with violence. Violence filling the land signals that creation itself is unraveling. The order established in Genesis 1 is collapsing. Only after this description do we encounter the sons of God. The text does not stop to explain who they are. That surprises modern readers. But the ancient audience did not need an explanation. Throughout the Old Testament, the phrase sons of God refers to divine beings, members of the heavenly host, created beings who operate under God's authority. Genesis 6 describes something unprecedented. A boundary is crossed. Heavenly beings step outside their assigned role. Earthly order is disrupted by rebellion from above. This is not framed as myth or metaphor. It is framed as violation. The result is corruption that goes beyond morality. The Nephilim are mentioned briefly, not as the focus, but as evidence. The text does not describe their appearance. It does not glorify them. It immediately moves back to violence and corruption. That is intentional. The problem is not size, and the problem is domination. The problem is disorder. This is why Genesis 6 leads directly into the flood narrative. The flood is not an emotional reaction. It is not God losing patience. It is presented as an act of preservation. Scripture tells us that God was grieved in his heart. This language does not imply regret in the human sense. It expresses that creation was being undone. In the biblical worldview, evil spreads if left unchecked. It corrupts systems. It distorts purpose. Left alone, it consumes everything. The flood is described as a reset. Notice what God preserves. Noah is described as righteous and blameless in his generation. That does not mean sinless. It means aligned with God's design. The ark itself mirrors creation order. Animals are gathered according to their kinds. Life is preserved within boundaries. Chaos is restrained. This is not accidental. The flood is not about destroying humanity. It is about protecting humanity's purpose. Without Genesis 6, the flood feels excessive. With Genesis 6, the flood becomes coherent. This passage explains why intervention was necessary. It also explains why the story does not simply end afterward. Violence returns. Giants appear again. The corruption is restrained, but not erased. Genesis 6 introduces a pattern that runs throughout the rest of Scripture. God intervenes when disorder threatens creation. He restores boundaries when rebellion crosses them. This pattern shapes Israel's encounters with giants. It shapes divine judgment. It shapes redemption itself. Genesis 6 is not there to confuse the reader. It is there to warn. When boundaries are ignored, creation suffers. When order collapses, intervention follows. In the next episode, we will look closely at those boundaries. What exactly was violated and why the consequences were so severe? If you want to continue exploring the ancient world behind the Bible, like and subscribe.